Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. And today I'm really so excited, not only because we are going to discuss about a topic that is a really, really hot topic right now. It's also because one of our top experts is with us today, Dr. Clara Seeger. Clara, thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here to talk about this topic.
I'm so excited because the last time we actually had the chance to discuss this topic was last January, where we were together on a panel discussion organized by Urban Yoga Lab at the All Bright Members Club. And that kind of discussion was dedicated, and it was all about the future of work. So that was the very first time I got the chance to hear you talking about sustainable employee well-being. And this is exactly what we are going to discuss today. And we're going to actually share some information and share insights with our HR network. And some HRs are actually wondering why are the existing employee well-being programs we have in place are failing. And today we're going to share best practices. We're going to have a conversation. And of course, if anyone who will be watching this replay later have any questions, feel free to let us know. You can always send us an email at info@urbanyogalab.com. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Alexandra. I am the founder of Urban Yoga Lab and Oxygen. I'm a corporate well-being architect and a former PR executive. Maybe this is why I'm so passionate about employee well-being and mental health. And today we have with us Dr. Clara Seeger. She's a highly experienced coach, corporate facilitator, online course creator, speaker, and author specializing in mental balance and well-being, mindfulness and meditation, neuroscience, and emotional intelligence. Clara works with senior leaders and their teams, helping them to foster a culture of sustainable well-being in the workplace. Her approach marries ancient contemplative wisdom and meditation with findings from neuroscience and psychology. Clara's comprehensive workplace program includes training in the 4 fundamental components of mental balance and well-being. So those 4 components, for those of you who are wondering, as attentional focus, sustainable vision and aspirations, refining the focus, as we said before, transcending unconscious bias, and cultivating emotional wisdom. And may I say that I feel like 90% of us, we actually need these tools, we need these techniques, we need those practices to navigate stress and anxiety and navigate uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty these days. So following her PhD and a career in investment banking, Clara was awarded a distinction in her master's degrees in mindfulness, neuroscience, and clinical applications from King's College. Her book is one of my most favorite books, and I highly recommend it, as Learn How to Be Mindful in 7 Simple Steps, which is a practical and neuroscience-based introduction to mindfulness for the workplace. Another book that you might want to check out is a neuroscience-based coaching book, Investing in Meaning, an alternative approach to leveraging your portfolio. We're going to include both books and all the information you might need and the description below, so you can go and check it yourself. But we and Urban Yoga Lab highly recommend, our entire team highly recommend, not only those books, but generally Clara's approach and way of thinking, and her employee well-being programs are absolutely a game changer when it comes to sustainable employee well-being. So today we have a really, really important topic to discuss: the importance of taking a preventative approach to workplace health. With so many challenges affecting our lives these days, as I said before, it's all about uncertainty, right? We see cost of living crisis, burnout, many Gen Z employees struggling with mental health issues, and so many other challenges. I feel, and I believe Clara feels as well, that long-term employee well-being, it's something that it needs to be on the top of our agenda at the moment. But what can we do about all those challenges that I just mentioned, right? Is there a single way to address these issues before they become major problems? So today we'll be speaking with Clara, and we will shed some light on this topic. Our aim is to provide you with practical tips and strategies for promoting healthy workplaces. So grab a cup of coffee and let's dive in. Clara, would you like to say a few words generally about this topic today? Why is it so important for you?
Yeah, it's my passion, as you know, I think by now. It's so important because it's something that I think we have neglected as a society, and this is something that's not being prioritized, and something we can actually do something about, and it costs nothing, really. In its most fundamental way. So it's something we can all do to change our own mental well-being, but also contribute to everyone else's. And I think as a society, we need to shift our views on well-being towards a more sustainable future. And we hear that word sustainability and, you know, environmental discussions and policy and economics, etc. But what this discussion misses is that in order to move towards more sustainable models of human thriving, we need to have a different conception of what well-being, mental well-being, is really about. So as long as we prioritize just, you know, more and more growth and production and consumerism, etc., we are not prioritizing sustainable well-being. And as a result, we are ending up with all the challenges that we're facing in our society today. And I think organizations in particular have a really important role to play to bring about this shift in perspective. And I think employee well-being is the perfect trigger for this, the perfect catalyst to bring about this reprioritization, if I could call it that, of our mental well-being.
Yeah, oh my God, it's so beautifully said, and I totally agree with you. I mean, when it comes to employee well-being in general, I feel like we need to redefine what well-being means, right? Yeah. And I see so many businesses which, with very good intentions, they organize a one-off yoga class, a one-off kind of workshop, and when they see that it doesn't work, they get really disappointed and kind of discouraged, right? So what I normally say is that it's because when it comes to employee well-being and employee mental health, our response to everything, it should be a proactive kind of approach, right? Our approach should be a proactive, a preventative, and not a reactive, right? So, and that's why we see like on-off or ad hoc kind of initiatives and employee well-being activities to not bring any results. So as a corporate well-being expert myself, so working with more than 50 brands all over the world, this is something that I have come to realize all the time. And this is that there is not a quick fix. There's not a silver bullet. There's not one single thing we can do and then our employees will magically learn how to manage stress and anxiety. And that's why it's so incredibly important to ensure the employee well-being strategies we have in place have been designed for the long term. And speaking of long term and speaking of sustainable well-being, what is sustainable well-being means to you and what's stopping us from attaining it?
Very good question. Yeah, what sustainable well-being, I mean, it says it in the word, but still I'm always surprised that it's not necessarily something that people get straight away. And I think that's a sign that we are not really thinking about it most of the time. Our idea of what well-being is a completely different one. And I think we need to come back to that sustainability notion. So sustainable well-being is a type of well-being that is not contingent on pleasant, amenable circumstances being present. It's a type of well-being that you bring to the world rather than what you get from the world. So what the ancient Greeks, as you well know, Aristotle, most notably, but also Plato and Socrates, talked about eudaimonia. And that's the kind of well-being that is a sort of inner flourishing, that is not derived from the pursuit of power, prestige, status, entertainment, relationships in the outside world, but it's something that we cultivate from within. And so that is what is sustainable, because as we all know, all the security and all the joy and pleasures that we have been looking for in the world suddenly were taken from us when we went into the lockdowns. And suddenly people's well-being suddenly crumbled. And that's because they didn't have it in the first place. Because sustainable well-being will not be threatened by that. Whereas the type of well-being that we are seeking, with the constant going out and looking for things to make us happy, that was easily taken away. So I think that was a great wake-up call to remember we actually need something that's more sustainable than that.
Oh my God, what you just said about the lockdown, it just made me recall how tough it was for so many employees from so many businesses we work with, how tough it was that period, because as you said, most of them they used to feel that well-being is at the local gym, the local yoga studio, you know, like even in the local pub, right, where it was their favorite place to be. And then when we experienced pandemic, that was, as you said, such a big kind of huge wake-up call for everyone to redefine what well-being means to each one of us, because it's a personal journey at the end of the day. And it's interesting that going back to our true purpose, going back to our true needs, to who we really are, it's what eventually leads us to experience sustainable well-being on the long term. And then, speaking of lockdown, I know that many employees struggle still up to this day with work-life balance. And this is because many of us, we are hybrid employees, right? So it's so hard to set the right boundaries. It's so hard to prioritize. It's so hard to disconnect and unplug, right? So my question to you is, how does work-life balance can impact an employee's brain and overall well-being? Based from your own experience?
Well, my experience is I do work from home most of the time anyway, so which brings its own challenges in terms of work-life balance. But you asked about the brain and how the brain is affected. It can really have a huge, and it's a very subjective, just to say that as well. Work-life balance is not an objective criterion. It's what you feel is in balance or not. So it's kind of a relative notion rather than an absolute notion. So when you feel that your work-life balance is not there or is threatened, this can affect many different systems in the brain, and it can lead, especially in terms of what we call the default mode network, which is associated of dwelling on things and not being overthinking, that a lot of people suffer from, and they can't sleep, they can't switch off, and that is something that a lot of my clients were saying, that it's very difficult through the blurring of the boundaries and the not having clear boundaries, and feeling that this balance is out out of whack somehow, it's very difficult to keep on track with attentionally, to keep thoughts at bay, and to make the right decisions, because ultimately it has an impact on decision making. So it's really the default mode network that's particularly challenged, I think, in those situations, and that really has a lot of correlation with different mental health issues.
Yes, and it's great what you said about, I mean, there's also chronic stress, right? There is loneliness, there is this element of not feeling socially connected and bonded with the rest of our team. And all those things can actually affect our brain, right? And it's interesting when, I have this conversation with people like you, Clara. You're a neuroscientist, and you can tell that you can speak about it from a scientist's point of view, but also as your corporate well-being expert, you can talk from the modern employers' point of view. So when it comes to chronic stress and anxiety, one of the greatest challenges is burnout, right? And personally, I feel that this is one of the main challenges why we need to be proactive when it comes to employee mental health. And it's also because I have personally experienced burnout while I was at work 6 years ago. And I was working for an elite PR agency here in London. And one day, out of the blue, I experienced burnout, and I needed to disconnect from work for a year, which for me as a workaholic person, it was a really traumatic experience. So this actually happened because first I had little or almost no awareness of what mental health is and how should I take care of my well-being and mental health in general. But also I was struggling with chronic stress and anxiety, which, as you said, affects the brain in so many different ways. So, and the third thing was that I didn't know how to seek help. So what are some of the long-term consequences of neglecting employee well-being in the workplace?
Where shall I begin? You've mentioned a lot of them already, but it does, well, first of all, it's leading to or exacerbating the mental health crisis that we already have, I think, in society and increasingly in the workplace as well. So neglecting that is contributing, exacerbating the problem on mental health alone. But it also has other effects that organizations need to be aware of, because this kind of situation, leads to sort of hyperreactivity in our brain to stress, to threat, so that we're hypervigilant, we're constantly in a state of fight or flight, etc. And when this happens, it's that what is active in the brain is the limbic system, which is where the fight or flight response takes place. And the effect of that is that the prefrontal cortex, which is what we rely on for our abstract thinking, our strategy, our planning, our organizational abilities, all these functions are impaired as a result of the limbic system being out of control. So what happens is we will find it difficult to pay attention, which is very important in the workplace, especially when you're dealing with really, important information or financial transactions or, decisions that will have a big impact, not least on the bottom line. So it can affect the attentional systems, and then as a result, it will affect decision-making, and it will affect the bottom line sooner or later. And not to speak of the whole morale and the culture at work, which is a big problem and which has been linked with the Great Resignation that we've been witnessing. So it has huge consequences.
I love what you said, and definitely, like, we see all those kind of challenges in this kind of post-pandemic world, like Great Resignation, quiet quitting, digital addiction. And personally, as a corporate well-being expert, what I get to see all the time is that those challenges have a direct impact to the company's success and overall productivity, right? So how would you say that long-term sustainable employee well-being can lead to greater levels of company success, greater levels of productivity?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you said it very well. I mean, that's exactly what I believe. And for me, I mean, just to come back to that notion of sustainable well-being, and what is encompassed by that is also how we use our mind, it's based on how we use our mind. So it's an awareness of how we use our attention skills, which we need in order to maximize our productivity, to maximize our performance. If we can't really use our attention skills effectively, if we're constantly distracted or ruminating, or we are in a sort of dullness, in a zoning out kind of mode because we are overworked and burning out and we can't focus at all, then it will have huge impact on the decision making and the productivity and the bottom line. So for me, that's an integral part of what I teach when I do my programs on sustainable well-being. Sort of learning to master our attention is absolutely crucial. What's also really crucial is how we perceive reality, because where unconscious bias, for example, comes in. That's part of my approach to sustainable well-being. It's not just about mental health problems, in that very narrow sense. And I think why organizations get well-being wrong, as I like to say sometimes, is because there's a very narrow definition of what well-being is. It's all about not feeling so stressed or not having a mental health crisis. But it's so much broader than that, because attention is part of it, cognition is part of it, emotions are part of it, ethics are part of it. It's all part, and how we set goals, what we prioritize, how we develop our aspirations, that's also part of it. And it doesn't just include our own psyche, it's also relational. It's what qualities we are fostering in the workplace, for example. Are we prioritizing empathy, compassion, pro-social behavior? That's also part of this education towards a more sustainable well-being. It's not just this narrow sense that people think about.
Wow, that's incredibly said. And you make it sound like, and I totally agree with you, it's a more kind of holistic approach when it comes to entire life, really, and it doesn't necessarily is a link only with financial well-being or physical well-being or family well-being. It's all those different pillars, and this is what exactly we share with our clients when we get to have a meeting or we get to give a consultation. It is so multidimensional, and there are so many different pillars. And speaking of pillars, Clara, what are other pillars of sustainable well-being from your perspective?
Right. The pillars of sustainable well-being are, first of all, getting clear on our aspirations, our goals, our intentions, our vision of what a good life or a good workplace is all about. So being able to have wise aspirations and wise goals rather than pursuing silly goals, let's say, right? So that's one pillar. So that's really the pillar of desires, aspirations, intentions, and goals. The second pillar is, well, there are four, but they could be expanded to six. Well, the second one would be the ethical. So ethical well-being, about, how we conduct ourselves, how we make decisions, and how do we, impact others? Is that a benevolent or a not so benevolent impact that we have through our ethical conduct? Then there is the attentional pillar, which, as I mentioned before, learning to master our attention, to control that sort of distractibility and the zoning out, not being able to focus. That's another pillar. Then there is the pillar of cognition, being able to have a very objective understanding of reality, objective perception of reality, rather than superimposing onto reality our prejudices, our biases, etc., etc. So that's where it really relates to unconscious bias training, for example. It's really about the pillar of objectivity, let's say, freedom from bias. Then there is the pillar of emotion and emotional health, which is not just emotional intelligence, but really the ability to cultivate wholesome emotions. And I mentioned empathy. Then there's sort of joy, rejoicing in other people's success, those kind of pro-social emotions, and understanding what emotions are healthy and what are not so healthy. And then it culminates in a kind of, let's say, spiritual well-being, which is all about understanding who we are, what we're doing here, what this life is all about, what are we here to accomplish as a human being. So altogether, there's 6 pillars, and this is based on a framework that's been taken from contemplative science, and that I'm using as a basis of my my training interventions and coaching interventions as well.
I love that. I absolutely love it. And it's interesting because every single time we got the chance to work together, the feedback, the testimonials, the response we get from clients and partners about your work is absolutely amazing. And you know, you are one of the experts that I admire and constantly inspire me. So yeah, I loved what you said about all those different pillars, because the way you look at it as human centric, really human centric, and that's what where you focus on when it comes to this kind of human touch element in every single program you deliver, and this is something I absolutely love. So in terms of long-term employee health programs, right? Many HRs, they tell me, Alex, sustainable employee well-being sounds great, but what are the specific strategies or techniques that I can use to promote sustainable employee well-being within my business? So what would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, the strategies are really, there's several that I could share here. The first one is education. And by education, I mean, is educating all employees about what we mean by well-being, and having a broader understanding of well-being as just this thing that a few people struggle with their mental health, and that's what well-being is about, and the rest of us, we're fine, we don't need any of that. So understanding the broad and comprehensive and holistic approach to well-being that encompasses all of the aspects that I've mentioned already. So that educational element, I think, is absolutely key, so that we're all kind of understanding, oh, that's what is meant. That's why it's important, because everybody can see how that all these things are important. I may not be struggling from stress or anxiety personally right now, but all of these aspects, they're not just for people who are struggling, they're for everyone. They're for all of us. And by the way, we can all be struggling as well. So there's no distinction there. So that's the first thing, the education. Then I think implementation. It's all about actually rolling out programs that will be taken not just by a small minority kind of peripherally in the organization, but is actually something that everybody should go through this. The leaders should go through this, because we need a top-down and a bottom-up approach. I think everybody needs to, you know, from the shop floor to the top echelons of the company, everybody needs to get on it. It's top-down, bottom-up. And then it needs to be then application. And by that, I mean, not just doing the course or doing a program and then continuing business as usual, but applying what we're learning to everyday situations, to how we interact with each other, to how we make business decisions, how do we conduct a meeting? Do we just talk over each other, or maybe can we just start with a sort of a quiet moment and introduce a sort of mindful minute before we start. You know, really applying what we're learning and making it across the board so that everybody knows we have a common language and we can all start using this to apply to every situation. This is not just a course or a program or an intervention that happens on the side. And then integration of any learnings into so that it converges the theory and the practice, that we have an actual practice, that it's not just theoretical knowledge, but we have a practice. And that's why all my programs are practice-based, but they also integrate the theory with the practice, because you get a lot of mindfulness programs where it's just doing mindfulness exercises. There's no vision of well-being, right? And then there's educational programs which just give you theory and cognitive learning. That doesn't shift the needle ever, as we know, right? It's only when you actually practice something.
Yes.
Right?
When you can embody.
You have to embody it. You have to practice it. You have to put your money where your mouth is. All that, walk the talk. Walk the talk, right? That's it. And we need to have practices that can help us cultivate that balance. And so that's why I'm so passionate about teaching that sort of integrated approach, theory and practice. And then it becomes something that's not just, although we each individually have to do the work for ourselves, we're not just doing it for ourselves. Because when I'm doing it for myself, I'm also doing it for you when I interact with you, right? I influence you, you influence me. And then we create a culture, which I'm really passionate about this idea of creating a culture of sustainable well-being, which can only happen if the whole company is on board, right? We're all on board and we all do it for ourselves, we all do it for each other. And then we create a culture that's radically different from the sort of sometimes toxic cultures that we encounter with bullying and microaggressions and all the rest of it, which can lead to that emotional labor, which then leads to burnout, as you mentioned, the burnout, right? And if we have a different culture, then we can thrive. Because we can't just thrive individually, right? We need to have the whole culture. It has to be systemic.
I can't agree with you more, Clara. And that's exactly what I was thinking while you were discussing this topic. I was like, oh, wait a second. This is not even just about a program. This is about the culture. And it's about how we actually together within an organization, we change the culture.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it should be a culture which is it is built on compassion, empathy, active listening, giving and receiving effective feedback, knowing how to navigate conflict. And that's how we change. And that's what I was thinking, in my case, we organize so many programs and so many, we do like hundreds. So far, we have done hundreds of programs. And what we have seen that works well each and every time is when the approach is holistic. And when the approach is, okay, let's build something where employees can come back to it, can be a virtual space, can be a series of workshops that employees can come back to week after week. It can be a virtual space where we meet on a regular basis and we are able to build psychological safety and be open to share and discuss things that break the stigma eventually, right? So we're really free to be open to share concerns and ask for help, which is another big thing when it comes to burnout, chronic stress, and anxiety. So that's how we build a culture, right? And from what you've said, that's what I hear is that we build the right culture, or we need to rebuild that in a way. It's not just about wellness. It's not just about well-being, meditation. It's about culture eventually. So I loved what you said. And then another question I get to hear all the time, and this comes from employees most of the times, is like, what can employees do? What are some practical steps that employees themselves can take to prioritize their own well-being for the long term?
That is such a big question. There's so much that they can do, but they don't all have the resources to do it. And by resources, I mean the insight or the information or the education, which is why I'm trying to share that wisdom, and the practices that go with it. But it's really, I mean, you know as well as me about all the benefits of being mindful and breathing and, doing yoga and going for walks and all the information that I think most of us kind of know. But it's really in the moment being able to not identify. If I give you one tip, right? And it's something that needs to be practiced. It's not something that, oh, I'm giving you a hack now and you're sorted, because it's easier said than done. And you need to practice and practice and practice. But you can start practicing and you can start getting that perspective, and it already helps. And so the tip is to not identify with everything that comes up in your mind, in your body, and in your environment. That's my top tip. If you sort that, if you get a handle on that, if we get a handle on that, well, we do have, that's already halfway there to sustainable well-being, right? So not having that identification with everything. Oh my God, I'm having these thoughts, or I'm feeling these uncomfortable emotions, or I'm feeling so stressed or anxious or lonely or angry or resentful or upset or sad, whatever we're feeling. Not invalidating it ever. We're feeling it. It's there to be experienced, but we don't need to identify with it. So if we don't identify with every mental state that comes up, then we're already halfway there. Then we're not affected, right? We're not so personally invested.
We're becoming the passive observer of this experience, right?
Yeah.
And that there's something so liberating when it comes to that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then again, when we talk about challenging emotions and feelings, I see a lot, so many employees actually try to, as I used to do myself, resist or suppress the emotions. On the one hand, or on the other hand, they're trying to escape those challenging emotions and feelings with binge eating or social media scrolling or doing things that can be self-sabotaging kind of things. And then, of course, those challenging emotions and feelings become more and more and more intense because we don't give them the time to mentally and emotionally digest and process those emotions. Because as you beautifully said, those emotions are there to be felt without though identifying ourselves with those specific emotions and feelings. We're just giving ourselves the chance, the opportunity to let them move through the body. And there are so many different ways, we can actually metabolize kind of those challenging emotions and feelings. It can be breathing, meditation, mindfulness, somatics, CBT, so many different tools. And my recommendation to employees is explore different ways and find your own favorite way, because each person's journey towards well-being and mindfulness is completely personal, and one size doesn't fit all. So my next question is about HRs, and HRs, the way I see them personally, I see them as healers in this world. And that's why I feel so much connected and so much, I can identify myself, I can resonate with the challenges and their needs and their priorities, simply because I see them as the healers, modern healers in our today's world. And in many cases, what happens with healers is that because they have the need to contribute and they have the need to help and lead us to a better world, a better environment, sometimes they tend to neglect their own well-being and mental health needs. And might sound like, an irony, but that's the reality. The other day I was looking at a report by KPMG, which shows that 98% of HR professionals are experiencing burnout.
98.
98 have experienced burnout at some point in their lives, or they will experience. I'm like, these are the people who are there to protect us, to support us, to help us to be proactive when it comes to our mental health and well-being. And they do it to that extent, which brings them, like in that situation where they are at risk of burnout themselves, which is, it sounds like surreal. It's true. It's interesting to hear your thoughts about what do you think, what steps do you recommend HRs to take to prevent and overcome burnout?
So it's really, it's really not different from anyone else. It's really about prioritizing that understanding of well-being, but getting the tools, getting the support, and the tools. So what you're saying is actually making me think that a program should always start with HR, because HR needs to get it first to get the benefits, to get the understanding, that educational piece that we were talking about. So broadening the vision of what well-being is really about. And also getting the tools, the methodology, the practices that they can then apply straight away to help their own well-being, and then also champion the cause for everyone else, because it's very difficult to get. And I was actually, many years ago when I was in investment banking, I started off being in HR for 6 months in the education department. And so I'm very well aware of sometimes tensions between HR and business leaders, and the kind of how, that there can be tensions. The dynamics between the business and the HR. So I'm very aware of that. But it's really important then to get HR to prioritize and start with HR, get them the tools, the practices and the education. And then and that will already help the situation, but then also help with the rollout to the rest of the company, because then they become champions. HR becomes a champion for well-being from their own personal experience, not because they have to meet certain goals, or because it's in the budget, or because, it's the thing to do, but because they've experienced the benefits for themselves. And then they can contribute to spreading the word and getting the business leaders on board, which I think is a crucial next step. But so looking after their own, after their own mental well-being, coming back to the I don't particularly like the idea, the notion of self-care, but it's not a bad one, but it's it goes beyond what self-care is usually means. But it's really important to get that sort of mental, you can call it mental hygiene, mental fitness, mental, just making your mind fit for service, because I think most of our minds are not fit for service. And it's not a criticism or a judgment, it's what's happening. And I include myself in that, but I've been fortunate enough to have that training and the education to actually practice some of these tools that I'm now teaching. And that's why I'm so passionate, because I see the benefit. And I want to share it with everyone. And I think we need that. We need that in the companies, but in society as a whole.
I love what you just said. And to HRs who might be watching this replay later, I just want to say that from my experience, I know that those people who are the healers of this world, of this society we're in, they need support too. And it's so important to be, honest with yourselves. And when you find yourself that you are at risk of burnout, when you find yourself a little bit more stressed, a little bit more anxious, a little bit more overwhelmed than normally, do always reach out for help. So that's the one thing, because we want to help others. And when it comes to us asking for help, we might be thinking twice. Please don't think it twice. Ask for help. And the second thing I want to mention is that HRs have so much on their plate, multiple projects, things to coordinate, budget to discuss, vendors to see, and so many events, initiatives, activities to organize, right? It's so important to have the right people around you to support you, because eliminating some of your tasks, automating, or even delegating is a great thing to do in times when you feel overwhelmed. So my suggestion to you is get to work with the right provider, with the right well-being body as our team, so we can help you with automation, elimination, and delegation, and we can make your lives a little bit easier, because that's our intention at the end of the day. And this is why we call ourselves your well-being body, right? So yeah, that was my my own suggestion. Now, as we move towards the end, my last question, Clara, is I know that you have amazing programs, amazing offerings in place for helping companies foster sustainable well-being. Can you tell us a little bit more about those programs?
So all the programs that I mentioned already are part of my offering. So programs on attention, programs on goal setting, on ethical decision making, on unconscious bias, on cultivating emotional wisdom. These are all self-contained programs, but they all work in tandem. So because they are the different pillars of sustainable well-being. And I also have introductory workshops introducing people to that idea of sustainable well-being, which is based on a well-balanced mind. And so there's an introductory workshop on the pillars of a balanced mind. And then there is a shorter intervention, like it can be between 8 and 12 weeks of a comprehensive program of the different pillars of well-being. And then each pillar also has its own program. But as an introduction, it's like the first workshop, which is, it could be a 2-hour workshop, it could be a 1-hour workshop on the different aspects of a balanced mind, the keys to a balanced mind as the basis, as the foundation. Then a sort of 8 to 12 week program, which has all the different pillars in it. And then individual, if you want to go really into attention, mastery of attention, for example, then you can have a whole program just on that, and really introducing the theory, the neuroscience of attention, and also a range of practices, time-tested, ancient practices adapted to training our attention.
Beautiful. I mean, it's so amazing that you give so many different options for people to experience this world of neuroscience and mindfulness and well-being, Clara. And I'm honestly, I'm a big fan and a big believer of your work. And I'm so glad that we get to work together in Urban Yoga Lab, in our programs, and to have the opportunity to collaborate in many projects together. So before we end our today conversation, is there anything that you wanted to highlight? Is there anything that you would like to recommend or suggest? Anything else that you would like to add in our conversation today?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity, and I always enjoyed talking to you. And I love that we are collaborating on these different initiatives, and sharing our passion for well-being. But I also want to leave people with a free course which I have developed. It's a short online on-demand course. It takes about 72 minutes, but it's broken down into little bite-sized pieces, video presentations and practices and exercises. And it's called Prepare Yourself for Sustainable Wellbeing. And so people can go to my website and just put their emails in, and then you have access, lifelong access to this course. You can take it in your own time. And it introduces you, and let me share my website. It's enlightenedleaders.com, enlightened leaders with a hyphen in between. So when you go there, it'll pop up. It should pop up, but you can also see it under my services. And yeah, so this course I recommend. It's because it introduces people to a foundational practice, which is about settling your body and your mind, your body, your respiration, and your mind, and just it's like pressing the reset button, I like to say. So it's a 3-step practice, and I introduce it in this course, and I take people through it and give some flavor, some instructions on how to practice it. And if there's one practice I would recommend for people who've never done anything like that before, this is it. And I think it can do wonders to just help people get through their days, through their life, and sets them up for cultivating sustainable well-being.
Amazing. Sounds fantastic. And we'll make sure we include the links down in the description so anyone can go and click on and just check the program. And I just want to say that I feel like that's all the time we have for today. I had such an amazing discussion with you, Clara, today. And as always, I've learned so much. And I do get it, why you are so passionate about sustainable employee well-being, and because you are so passionate, you inspire others, you make others being passionate about this topic. And that's exactly what it happened between us 3 months ago when you had this, when you started having this conversation during our panel discussion about how incredibly important is employee well-being. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights today. As you know, we talked about the preventative approach in workplace health, and it is clear, I believe, after this conversation, that taking proactive steps to promote employee well-being doesn't only benefit employees, but also leads to a more productive and successful workplace. And as Clara mentioned earlier, small changes can make a big difference. So let's do not underestimate what little steps can do when it comes to the overall journey towards our destination, which is well-being, mental health, work-life balance. So let's start implementing some of the strategies we shared with you today. And let's make our workplaces healthier and a happier environment for everyone. Thank you all for tuning in, and we look forward to see you next time. Clara, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your energy, your vibes, and all your insights. It was incredible. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Alex. I really enjoyed it.
I had such a great time, and I look forward to our next conversation. Yeah, I hope we'll get to have this chance soon again, either during a panel discussion, either during an interview, or either during a workplace program. So if you want to find out more about how we can support your businesses, how we can actually support your HR teams, feel free to connect with us. I'm going to include our social media links in the description below. I'm going to include my personal kind of email, so you can reach out and ask me any questions, or book a discovery call with me. It's complimentary, and we can have a virtual coffee where I can share some of our best practices with you. Thanks for watching. Clara, have a beautiful weekend. And I look forward to see you soon.
Yeah, me too. Have a great weekend. And thank you, everyone who's listening.
Thank you for accepting my invitation.
My pleasure.
Have a great one. Cheers.
Bye.
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 Guys. Okay.